Hello and welcome to the DIESOL podcast. We are your hosts, Brent Warner
and Ixchell Reyes.
Hi, Ixchell. How are you?
Hey.
You sound very excited. So that's like one of my students' responses. Hi, how are you? Hey. Okay, so I'm going to assume that means awesome, awesome. I do with my students. So we actually just recorded and released an episode last week, but we are feeling funky, and it is October, and we wanted to do a Halloween special, so we're giving you a 2-for-1 in October. And Ixchell, we talked a little bit about this, maybe about experimenting with more common releases.
Right. We want to know how often you'd like us to release, so let us know.
Yeah. So right now, our regular schedule is the first Monday of the month, and we did our special one before all of these conferences that I'm getting into and that you're getting into. But we are thinking maybe we could go for twice a month. Just because I think we enjoy recording this and we're learning a lot by doing it on our own.
Yeah. And so I know some people might want to hear different topics. Twice a month it sounds good. So let us know. We also want to mention that our audio has been changing a little bit. We've been testing to see what it sounds like when you're listening in the car. So this one, you should hear a little bit of an improvement.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, you guys. So I was all bragging on the last episode that everything sounds perfect. And by the way, our voices do sound good. So it's not actually the sound of our voice, but then I listened in the car, and Ixchell, you were unfortunately kind of droned out by the hum of the freeway driving around.
Right.
And so I apologize for that. That is my fault or the machine's fault. I'm not sure, but I'm taking a little bit of responsibility for it. And so in this one, I'm going to be carefully editing, and if you hear it uploaded, you should know that means I actually took this episode for a baby drive on the freeway somewhere and tested it out before, so that we both sound we're both audible while driving.
Yeah, and I tested the sound on other devices as well, and it seems to me that it's only happening in the car right now. So
yeah, it's the quality of your voice. It's just like it's soothing like the freeway. We're gonna get it sorted out. But I do apologize. So I think if people were listening like sunbathing in their backyard, which I think is my image of how most people are listening to the show, then it probably sounded fine. But yeah, we're working on
not in October.
No, I guess not. All right, we'll have to wait again for summer to come. So one other thing, we did update the website. So Ixchell, any thoughts on the new website?
Yeah, it's looking good. It's looking really nice and clean, and we're putting up photos and the show notes. So check it out.
We're getting there. It's getting a lot better. All of these things are coming together. Sometimes you just have to start things going, and then you clean them up as you go. I think we know this as teachers. So please do check out DIESOL.org. It's pretty great.
All right. Well, Halloween is coming up. Brent, do you have any plans?
I am still thinking about this. People are asking, what are we going to do? What's happening? And my only real plan is to wear a very giant, obnoxious costume that gets in everybody's way. How about you?
You could be a princess.
Oh, yeah. Well,
the tallest, most obnoxious princess ever.
Are there any like giant princesses? I think that would be a good news story that we could make up.
You could be Fiona from Shrek.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good one, right? She knocks through some walls, so I like that one. So, Ixchell, Halloween is hands down my favorite holiday, and I think yours too, right?
Absolutely, I love Halloween.
Yeah, it really motivates me to get into the spirit and like crawl out of the gutter and get into the sunlight with the other ghouls and goblins. And so all of this motivation talk is leading us right into today's topic, which is all about motivation.
So inevitably, when we talk about motivation, games always come to my mind. And that's because games are a lot of fun. Aside from the competitive aspect of it, you start enjoying being in a group. And so I took a look at a research article called Collaborative Learning Through Language Games in the ESL Classroom that was published in Language in India by Saha and Singh in 2016. And what the researchers found was that when they used games as an activity, as a language learning activity, there was a shift from the teacher to student interaction to more of a student to student interaction.
Yeah.
Which I know is something that is paramount, that, something we're looking for when we're teaching.
Right. So I experience this quite a lot, and this is kind of one of my favorite moments in the classroom. Like if the students kind of are working together with you, and then all of a sudden you walk around and they give you the shoe off, right? Get out of my face. They don't need
me anymore.
Yeah, I know what I'm doing, right? And that moment there is like, yeah, it's a little sad, but it's like that parent, letting the kid go drive the car by themselves for the first time or whatever it is, right? It's like, oh, okay. And that's one of my happiest moments in the classroom is like, we got this. And it happens most often when we're doing games and game type activities.
And another really important point is that games lower the anxiety level in students. And when we talk about the lowering the affective filter in students, this is important, especially for those who have anxiety for making mistakes.
Yeah. Especially if there's no end value, like you see the games get a lot more attention. Well, they go both ways, right? But like, hey, this is not for actual points. Like this is for your game and what you're going to get through here, right? And it's like low stakes activity, low anxiety, and even the shyer students jump into it.
Right. Finally, the article pointed out that games engage the learner's interest. And of course, this is something that I think you and I both agree that if students are more engaged, they're more likely to internalize what they're learning. And so sustaining motivation. What else does the literature say, Brent?
Yeah, so I was looking at an article from Foreign Language Learning Motivation in Higher Education by Busey and Walter in 2013. And again, we'll have links to these in the show notes. But basically, it was pretty interesting. It was talking about people studying German and studying the German in these language schools. And it was showing that these students studying foreign languages showed that although the desire is there, the intrinsic and extrinsic motivation of first-year students over the span of that year significantly decreases, right? So students want to learn things, but if they're studying a foreign language, then they stop seeing what's going on, right? And they're just like, oh, I'm interested in this thing, but where's it going with? Where's it taking me? What's happening? And so for us as ESL teachers, one of the big things we have to be aware of is that students tend to move into this loss of motivation because they are underprepared and they don't have an awareness of the requirements going on at the college level. So if we're talking about college level, students move in and they're kind of like, hey, I'm used to my old-fashioned ESL school, and it's like, hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you, right? And then it's like, oh, now you need to synthesize multiple ideas from, various, vetted sources and show me how those ideas combine into one original idea. It's like, wait, what, right? And so students aren't really prepared for that. And so one of our responsibilities as teachers, according to this article, is to be a lot more careful when you're scaffolding the learning tasks. So how are you building this up, and how are you showing them through the process that they can do all of these things? Because it's not necessarily capacity. In fact, it's not at all capacity. They have the capacity to learn these things, but it might not be that they're aware of what they need to be able to do. So that's one big one. And then another one is intensified motivational practice. So this is kind of like what you were talking about too. Basically, they're saying, hey, make it low stakes and high impact. So again, going back to games, going back to activities, if you can say, hey, this doesn't really count, against you, it's not going to hurt you, it's not going to ruin your grade if you don't do well on this thing, but let's get into it and let's talk. Then it's like, oh, all those pressures that hold up so many students get dropped away, and then they can focus in on, I want to use this language point, I want to make sure that I'm getting my idea across clearly.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so there's a lot to it. And then the last thing that they were kind of talking about too is that, especially with the foreign language aspect, so if a student is in an EFL setting, and they might have insufficient opportunities for language practice. So I think even in the ESL setting, this is still problematic for a lot of our students.
Right.
Ixchell, you and I used to talk about this too. Like, we had a lot of students from China when we worked together, and they kind of hung out in their Chinese communities, and they, after, like, during breaks and after school, it was like, boom, we're moving back into Chinese, and we're Chinese speakers. And this is true of, many different communities that are built around, a lot of immigrants come in and they build their community, but they're losing opportunities for relevant content, and they might have indifferent relationships with their language teachers. So all of these things could kind of lead to lack of sustaining motivation.
Right.
So with all those things in mind, we are going to shift into some best practices that you can use. Okay, so straight off the bat, number one, if we're talking about digital integration, we need to meet our students where they are with technology and with language learning, and making things accessible to them, because as soon as something's accessible, it creates motivation, right? You say, hey, we're doing this game on your phone, or even if it's a board game that you make, or a paper board game, or whatever it is, that creates instant motivation.
Right. And, I had the opportunity to attend a workshop that you did on gamification in the ESL classroom. And I also got to observe doing a workshop that you also did in Orange County, where you showed two different styles of promoting motivation and collaboration. And a lot of it had elements of games. Can you describe those for our audience?
Yeah, so those two workshops were a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun preparing them, but they were kind of variations on kind of the same thing, where people were working on a puzzle in order to get through a process, right? And each puzzle was kind of unlocking a language clue or some sort of aspect of language that you need to use. One was a Breakout EDU, right? So if you haven't played with Breakout EDU, you can go and search for that on Google. But basically what it is it's a reverse escape room. So there are clues all around the classroom or around whatever area you're working in. And then in the middle of the room, there's a box, and that box has a bunch of different locks on it. And then as you solve the different clues around the room, then those give you the answers to the box, right? Or to an individual lock on the box. And then you keep unlocking them as you move all the way through. So that was one of the activities that we did. And then the other one was one clue led to the next clue, led to the next clue, and people had to use different technology tools in order to figure out what the next thing that they would be doing was. So I think those were those two activities. They're pretty in-depth, but I think people got a lot of value out of them.
You like to play with people's minds.
Yeah, but it was fun, right? I mean, I did have some resistant people too. I should point that out, just like you will with students, right? They're like, what's the point of this? And it's like, well, you have to work through it in order to figure it out, right? And so you don't always know like what's going to happen or how the language is going to unfold as you're going through something. And so sometimes you just get into the experience, and then afterwards you can see what's going on. But a lot of people, not a lot, but a couple of people said, I just want the end result. Just give me the goodies at the end. And I'm like, well,
yeah. And with games, sometimes you have the players where they're passive players, but again, you want to maximize as much as you can for your students. So thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about what challenges you came across while you were applying these strategies?
Yeah. So number one thing is that it takes time to build these out, right? You really need to think about like every idea, how one idea leads to the next, how the, in our case, how the language goals connect to the process of what they're doing. Is it about a grammar point, or is it about like using certain points of grammar in order to be able to explain some sort of idea. There's all these parts to it, right? So you really actually do have to sit down, and it takes a lot of time to plan these things out. Really does take several, many hours of work. Of course, you can save it and use it again and again, but that first time for prepping, it's like if you're not into building a puzzle, then it's going to be a challenge. If you're using Breakout EDU, so you'll see that, hey, there's a box and you can go buy this box, but I only have one. And so when I'm working with like 25 students or something, it's a bit of a challenge to have 25 students all trying to work on one box at the same time. And so I would recommend, if you can afford it or if you can get someone to buy it for you, go and get maybe one box for every 4 or 5 students or something like that. That's what I would do in the future. And then finally, Breakout EDU now does cost money. It always cost a little bit, but it's become more of a business model, and I don't fault them for that. That's what they got to do, and it is a good activity and good work, but we're on teachers' budgets, and sometimes it's hard for us to be able to figure out those things. So if you're trying to get the all of the good stuff from them, it's going to cost you a little bit.
And you're saying Breakout EDU is a kit that comes with items that you can.
Breakout EDU is a kit that it's a box. First of all, it's just a box, but it's got the clasp on it, and then it's got all these ways to put these different locks onto it. But when you buy that box, you're also getting access to many of the digital resources so that you can play different types of games with your students.
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, it takes time to build them out. I saw you in action. So if you don't have the time, you can always ask Brent to come to your school and yeah. Sorry, I had to plug it because those are 2 awesome workshops that I went to.
Yeah, I thought you just meant I'm going to go teach their class. Just have Brent come over and teach your class for you one day.
Hire him.
So I should point out, though, that students do respond to this pretty well. They get into it and they forget that they're studying. And Ixchell, you and I talk about this quite a bit, right? That idea of it's like, hey, I'm not studying, I'm just doing something. And guess what? Doing that thing happens to be being done in English, and it's negotiation of language and ideas and sharing thoughts, and all of those things are happening in English at a level where it starts to feel more natural and somewhat challenging for them. But that's a big deal to me too, is that they're working, studying, negotiating in English, but not really thinking of it as work in the traditional sense.
And there's a lot of problem solving, so they're internalizing a lot of the English. So what tips would you give to someone who wants to try this out, something like this out?
The number one thing is give yourself time to prepare for this, and maybe also work with one of your more flexible classes. So the idea here is about sustaining motivation, but if you have a class that's resistant to, what's going on or whatever else is happening, I had this somewhat recently, and it was a little bit of a challenging class. And it was like, okay, hold on. Let me work with this with the class that I know and that is ready to jump into things. And then once I'm more comfortable with the materials and with the activity, then I'm ready to switch over. So that's the one thing that I would just say is give yourself time, and don't plan on doing these things like every day, right? Maybe once a semester or once a month in a semester or something like that. But again, you'll see how much time it takes to actually do. So if you're interested in those types of things, I'd get started by looking at Breakout EDU. But Ixchell, one of the things we were talking about here, these are some higher involvement activities, right? It's pretty hardcore. But we're also talking about motivation and like, okay, I can't do that every single time. So I did want to talk about some quick pick-me-ups to kind of get your students involved. Do you have any go-tos, like when the morning coffees don't do it for your class?
Well, yeah, I have. There's two tools that our audience may already be familiar with. One of them is Kahoot, and that is online multiple choice quizzing that students can do with their mobile devices. And it just adds the element of a countdown, and then also the element of how fast you can enter your answer. So I use that usually as a quick review. It can really be limited to, a lot of it is just vocabulary, and you probably don't want to you want to limit how many questions, because it gets pretty old after a while. I've heard some students be all Kahooted out because every teacher was doing a Kahoot in their class.
Yeah, that has been a problem with me too, and I am wary. I love it. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it, but I am definitely wary about overusing it, because I get students that are like, are we doing this again?
Yeah.
So use it, try it. If you haven't ever used it, if your students have never seen it, it's great, but be sparing with your Kahoot love, I guess.
Yeah, I have the luxury of having my students for a whole month, the whole entire month. And so I know that they're only getting me as a teacher. So they'll ask for it, they'll beg for it. And so because they don't get to, and plus they're not allowed to use phones often. So Kahoot is one. The other one I also like for review, a quick review, is Quizlet. I use, it's also, again, you're matching vocabulary, you're matching items together. But my students like to, I use my teacher account, so they see my picture moving up in leaderboards. So they like to get me, I try to challenge them as a class to get me to first place. So they see my picture moving up. And
okay, now explain this to me for a second, because I haven't seen this before. So you're saying your students can boost your teacher profile somehow?
Yeah. So as a teacher profile, you're going to have access. It looks similar to a student profile, but you have the matching activity that you can do up on the board, and students will be matching, and it's timing them. There's the countdown, and when they're finished, they'll get, you've I don't know, completed this in 24 point blah 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 seconds. And if the person somewhere on the other side of the world did it in 25, then your picture moves up, and now you're third in the world for this activity.
Okay. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, Quizlet is newer to me, or less. I haven't explored it less, and I noticed you talking about it a few times on Twitter, and I'm like, I need to explore this a little bit more. But I wasn't aware that this existed, so that sounds really cool. Except my problem here, Ixchell, your students like you, so they want to.
Yeah, they like my picture going up.
If your students don't like you, you might have a little problem with that, right?
Yeah, like, I'll just take my time. Make you 100th place.
Yeah, we're gonna drop you, Sensei. Yeah. Right? Okay. Okay. So Quizlet matching can be a good one, and actually, like I said, you had been talking about it, and so I did a little bit of exploration with it. On my other podcast, the Higher EdTech podcast, and I was amazed at how much cool stuff is going on here. So there's really a lot to learn about and a lot to see with Quizlet and some of these quizzing games. But I also wanted to share one other one that's a little bit quicker. And if you have not ever heard of the Edu Protocols by Marlena Hebern and John Carippo, they're kind of Q people, the computer using educator people. They have a book, and they actually just came out with their second book, the Edu Protocols Field Guide #2. But one of the activities in there that I really like to use with my class is the thin slides. Have you heard of this one, Ixchell?
No, I've heard it from you for the first time. So tell me more.
Yeah, so I put this into the show notes, right? And we're like, okay, let's look at these thin slides. Well, basically, what you do is you create a shared Google Slides, and all of your students jump into one slide deck all at the same time. And then they have to run down the slides that show up on the left, and they have to pick an individual slide. And every student is responsible for one slide in the deck. So they learn how to do that, and they do it pretty quickly. You have to kind of help them to not delete each other's work and things, but they do. Once they get that, then the typical process for this is one slide, one picture, one word, or sometimes I say one phrase. So I might ask them a prompt, and then they are responsible inside of a few minutes, and you set a short time limit, and you say maybe 3 minutes or 4 minutes, and you say, go out, find a picture that represents this idea, and then find a word or a phrase that represents it, and then create an artistic slide with the word and the picture together, and then you're going to give a mini presentation about 20 seconds explaining how this is part of this concept, right? So for example, I did, when we were doing Fahrenheit 451, we were reading Fahrenheit 451, and I did dystopia, right? And so they said, okay, dystopia is, go figure out and show the class what this means. And so then they ran out and they found these pictures of like decrepit cities, and some of them did zombies and all these other things, right? And then they put in these words like lonely or empty, or, you know, different things like that. And then the challenge was I just went right through the slides. I said, next for 20 seconds each. And they had to share real quickly how their picture and their word matches in with the idea. So when you have 20 people doing this at 20 seconds each, you're done in 5 minutes, right? Everybody's presented inside of here. And then you're really quickly giving everybody a bigger sense about like understanding this concept behind this, and so that they can really get into it in the future. So, and then the idea with the Edge of Protocols is you can apply this to anything, right? So your prompt just changes and they know how to do it, but it's completely new material, completely new content every time. And I was really surprised at how engaged I got students, and especially with that 20 second speech thing, right? It's just like, oh, you're next. Oh, I'm up. I didn't know which slide I chose. I'm just up suddenly, right? And so it can be a lot of fun, and the class all pays attention, and they see the big pictures up on the projector that they made. And so if you haven't checked that out, Edu Protocols Field Guide, it's available on Amazon and everywhere, and you can go find this information online. It's not like you have to buy the book, but I do recommend it because they put a lot of work into this, and there's some really cool ideas.
Pretty cool.
All right, Ixchell, it is time for our fun finds. What do you got for me?
Well, I have not one, but two to match our 2 for episode special. And the first one is an oldie but goodie. They are, do you remember those markers that used to have scents, and you could each one matched a different fruit, like the
grape and lemon and whichever.
Yeah, right? So those are Mr. Sketch scented markers, and the 12 count pack, because I'm a teacher and I have to scavenge. Those are about $5, so $4.99 on Amazon. You can't find the 12 count anywhere else, and if you do find the 10 count, I believe it's like almost between $10 to $12. So it's a really good find. I use them because when my students get a little sleepy right before lunch or right after lunch, I'll pull them out and I'll have them do a poster activity. And then I just tell the students, make sure you smell them. Once they figure out that they have different scents.
I feel like we were discouraged from smelling these markers too much as a kid. Like I thought there was like issues about brain damage and other things like that, but you are encouraging this for your students.
If you have students walking around with a purple mustache, you know what happened.
Ixchell Reyes, drug pen huffer promoter. Okay, well, just remember that out there, people. Okay.
And the second fun find is if you like to get brainy about Halloween, this is NPR's The Hidden Brain episode called Things That Go Bump in the Night. Yeah, Shankar. Things that Go Bump in the Night, Halloween, and the Science of Fear. So it's an awesome listen for the month.
Awesome. Very cool.
What's your fun find?
So mine is actually something I just found today, pre-recording. It's called Untitled Goose Game.
Goose Game.
Yeah, it's I don't know what platforms it's on, but it is on Nintendo Switch, and I downloaded it for Nintendo Switch. It's a really cool, mellow kind of puzzler game, but you play a goose. And you know how geese are kind of like troublemakers? So your job as the goose is to like go around town and make trouble, essentially. And people are kind of scared of you, but kind of want to get rid of you at the same time. And so basically you're just like running around town, like stealing people's sandwiches and like poking them in the butt with your bill, and, you know, stealing things from them. So it's just kind of like a silly but kind of meditative puzzle game where you're like, okay, I need to figure out how to do these different things so that I can get through the gate. And it's this cool low tech art, and so it's kind of simple and clean looking. It's called the Untitled Goose Game, and if you wanted to go look at a video of it, it's actually got a cool URL. It's www.goose.game. So they use the game URL.
Never seen that before.
Yeah, it's cool.
That sounds like a lot of fun. All right, it is time for us to wrap up, but you can find our show notes, other episodes, and more at diesel.org.
And you can also find us on Twitter. I am at Brent, Brent, the letter G, Warner, Brent G. Warner.
And I am at Ixy_Pixie. That's IXY_PIXY.
So we would love it if you would leave us some ratings and reviews. We have been getting some, actually. Ixchell, have you noticed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you guys.
I saw some and I'm like, I must know who these people are, because who else would be leaving us reviews? But to tell the truth, Ixchell, actually, some people, we've had quite an okay number of downloads for a really starting up show.
For a launch, right?
Yeah. And so thank you guys for listening. It really does help us out when you give us some reviews. Especially those iTunes reviews. Those are the ones that really drive the search engines. And so 5-star reviews are cool. 4 ones are so painful, but no, I'm just kidding. You can give us an honest review. We can handle it. But we really, really love the comments and what the reason for the show is. Yeah.
Give us some feedback. Let us know. Keep us motivated.
Indeed.
In Mandarin, thank you is 谢谢. 谢谢 for tuning in to the Diesel podcast.
Thanks, you guys. Bye.
Bye.